also want to thank specifically Lily, Nelly, Panayota, Vasilis, and Dimitri for organizing the event and helping us out so that we didn't have to, spend all the organizational energy putting everything together. So that was a great help. So we will start by, I think, having some music, and during that time, everyone will be muted. And then we will start with the sharing, and I will guide through that first part. And then Lily later on will guide more through the, professional sharing that will follow later. But yeah, I just want to thank you all for joining today. It's incredible to see how many people are here. I think we're 243 people, which is just incredible to think about that. And yeah, so many people that haven't connected for a long time coming together for this, let's call it celebration. This is how we call it in preparation of today. Obviously, there's going to be sadness, and it's obviously been a sad time for our family and for a lot of people. But like was said earlier, there's also a lot of happiness in the room, which I agree, it's incredible to see the energy and the happiness around here. And that's why I think we want to view this whole event as a celebration of David. So with that being said, Dimitri, maybe we can move to the music, and then we'll start with the sharing.
It's a piece of music that actually David selected for this ceremony. So sit back and relax, and for the next 3 to 4 minutes, join everyone spiritually and think about David.
Thank you so much for having that moment of silence and listening to the music. For anyone who's interested, it's Adagio or Adagio, I don't know how you pronounce, by Albinoni, which was a music that was very important for both my father and my mother. And so we will start the sharing, and I'll pass the word to my mother at this point. Silvia?
Yes, I have heard it. I'm just a bit out of words by the music. Yeah, I'm sitting here in David's library, where he spent a lot of time in his life, where he worked and where he died.
Где-то там снег лежит.
For the last 2 years, because of the world situation, we didn't have any courses anymore. After running trainings, courses with lots of people for 35 years, we were suddenly left just the two of us. Then we had also completed the Biosynthesis method book. We had completed writing it, over 1,000 pages actually in this library. And so we were left with lots of time, just the two of us. And that gave us in the last 2 years an additional fulfillment. We started every morning here with a meditation. Then David wrote a poem. I wrote my text on my novel about creation, about Sophie Teuber-Arp, where I wanted to show how she creates in order to get the guidance for me. And then when I had finished writing this, I decided to write a novel about our love, because I wanted to be even more close to David and his poems, because each poem of him was a love poem. So we were sharing this, what we wrote, in the evening, and got new inspiration, which was then coming up in the morning, meditation. And so we were living in a cycle of mutual creativity and dialogue. And we were realizing that time is very precious. Then David died. It was at that moment unexpected. And that gave a kind of rupture. For me, because after all these years, over 40 years of intimate being together, suddenly his physical body was gone. So I had to find myself again. And I went on writing the novel of our love, and I'm still writing it. And I have the feeling that this circle of mutual creativity and dialogue with David is still going on. I want to give you a taste of it. and I'm reading you David's latest poem and then my answer to it. So David's latest poem is Sunrise in late October. Even when I'm old, the sun's gold seems very young. As we watch it rise, streaming into our room, full of surprise for our eyes. May the sunrise guide us all, keeping our gaze true in different ways, of meeting nature, hopefully, in the near future. Poem 1187 on the 27th of October, 2021. My poem to David was rising out of a ritual which Till and I did on the 6th of January 2022, where we were carrying David's urn around a tree, just a magnificent ash tree, just on this corner of his library where he looked every day. And we were giving his ashes to the cosmos. So in my poem come the word from a Latin word originating from the ancient Greek, which is called Elysium and means paradise. Ashes in early January. You look at me out of the urn, rejuvenated. It snows jewels. Your ashes around the ash tree sprinkled. The snow on the trunk is from Elysium. Leaning onto it, I. This sounds in German in the original language. Du schaust mich an aus der Urne, verjüngt. Es schneit Juwelen. Deine Asche um die Esche gestreut. Der Schnee am Baumstamm ist aus Elysium. Daran angelehnt ich. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much for sharing. So I will go next. On the evening that my father passed away, I spent quite a lot of time sitting next to him. At the time, I didn't know yet that he wouldn't wake up the next morning, but he had been sick with a lung infection for quite some time already. And that evening, I suddenly had an impulse, some kind of inner feeling that I just had to speak with him. I'd spoken with him a lot before already, but sometimes there's also distractions that happen. You know, you get pulled out of the moment and you try to deal with what's happening with sadness. But that evening I knew I had to be extremely present with my father. And I didn't know exactly why, but I just knew it was important. So I sat next to his bed and spoke with him for several hours that evening. And what I did is I expressed my gratitude to him. I thanked him. And I told him over and over again that he was surrounded by love. And I took pictures of different people that were important in his life and set them up around him so that they would look at him. So he was really, really embedded in this very special energy in the same room that my mother is sitting right now when she just spoke. And as I held his hand, and although he couldn't speak anymore at that point, he signaled to me through slight hand gestures by pressing my hand that he was still listening, that he was still fully aware and fully present himself, although he couldn't really move much anymore or say anything. And he tried to speak, he tried to open his mouth and say something in response to what I was saying, but he couldn't. But I told him that that was okay, and that I knew that he was listening and that he was hearing what I was saying. And in that moment, I realized it struck me somehow the four main qualities that my father had. And those qualities for me are deep love, deep kindness, deep patience, and deep wisdom. And that is, I realized that evening that is really who my father was for me. And I told him several times during that night that I saw these qualities in him, and I thanked him for those. And again, as he listened, he squeezed my hand. He was fully present. He heard everything that I said. He acknowledged. And he basically, he used all of his strength at the time to just signal to me that he was aware of what was going on and that he was listening and kind of thanking me for what I was saying at the time as well. And although it might have looked like I was speaking to myself, talking to myself, to an outsider, if someone would have seen what was going on in the scene, looking back at it, it was the most important conversation that I ever had with my father, although I was the one speaking verbally, but we were still communicating and speaking on a much deeper level than we had ever before. And I believe that was also the case for him, not just for me, that was the most important conversation that we ever had. And so after a few hours of speaking to him like this and sharing, the next morning I went to bed, and the next morning when I found him, he was in his bed and he was not breathing anymore. But there was no shock, there was no panic, there was no terror, there was nothing overwhelming in that moment. It was just peacefulness in the room, peacefulness on his face. I was peaceful, and it was a very calm moment. And I view these four qualities, deep love, deep kindness, deep patience, and deep wisdom, as gifts that my father has left And as he was still alive, I promised him that I would also do my best to embody these qualities myself and pass them on to my children throughout my lifetime as well. And I believe we all who are here today, the world as a whole, we would all be better off if we had more of these 4 qualities in us. And because of that, I believe that my father can serve as a role model, not just for me, not just for his family, his friends, his students, but for the whole world, for everyone. And for that, I'm deeply, deeply grateful for my father. Thank you. So with that being said, thank you for listening. I pass the word on to my wife, Inês.
Thank you, Till, for sharing.
Thanks.
So I'm next. I'm sorry. I first saw David on a PowerPoint presentation when I was doing my biosynthesis training. And, you know, at the time, I really had no idea we would come to be a part of the same family. And the first thing I want to say is that I'm really grateful to David for creating together with Silvia, obviously, and leaving behind 2 masterpieces that I love so much and that changed my life. One of them is my husband, and the other one is related to my work. Biosynthesis psychotherapy changed my professional life, and it continuously fulfills me and enriches it, and for that I'm very thankful. I love my work, and I don't think I ever want to retire, so I think that's a good sign. It was an honor to share a full cycle of 7 years of having David in my life, and we shared a lot of wonderful professional and personal moments. I think that his quiet presence will always be missed at the kitchen table during meals, with everyone being so loud around, and he would just sit and be so peaceful and mostly silent. I was lucky enough to have him as a grandfather for our 2 children, and I'm sure Lukas, our oldest, will remember fondly waking him up in the morning and playing with his telephone. I will always remember David when I look at my children's hands, because they all have the same hands as Till and his dad, very long fingers. I think it's one of the first things I saw when they were born. Sorry. I'm always talking to him about his and my life. He could always give me enriching knowledge, advice, and ask me the right questions. Or sometimes just sit quietly looking through one of the many windows in Benzeruti while one of my kids napped on me or was being breastfed. I think he had a great long life. I'm really happy we could see him right before he left us. The week he died, I wasn't in Switzerland, but I dreamt of him and I could say goodbye to him in this dimension. And I asked him if we could have him more time. I don't remember the answer, but he just swirled away in like a rainbow of many colors. And I think that is comforting for me. And to finish, I translated a poem from a Portuguese poet that I liked, and I think he would like it too. I hope so. It's by Sofia de Melo Breiner, and it goes like this. When my body perishes and I am dead, the garden, the sea, and the sky will go on. And just like today, the 4 seasons will equally dance on my doorstep. Others in April will walk through the orchard that I walked through so many times. There will be other sunsets over the sea, and others will love the things I loved. There will be the same spark, the same celebrations. There will be the same garden at my doorstep and the forest's golden hair, as if I was not dead. Thank you, everyone. I'm sorry. Don't think I had a lot of chance to cry, and it's making it more real for me. So thank you.
Thank you for sharing. So I pass the word on to my brother, Adam, who is David's first son, together with his wife, ex-wife, Elsa.
Maybe you have to invite him to unmute.
Hello.
Hi, Adam.
Well, Till has said just about everything from my own heart. And normally I would, or usually I would turn up at an event like this, which of course is a one-off, completely unprepared, and just move with the moment. That I did write something down earlier today, and therefore I am a little prepared. Right, and just off the cuff now, from the top of the moment, what is hardest for me is the physical distance in these past 2 years that I would have liked to have visited even a few times, and at least one good visit in this downtime that we've had in the whole of society. Now, here, let's move with forward. I would write a poem or something saying how my dad was the best dad that anybody could ever wish for. Anyway, I had a most amazing childhood growing up in his world. Some memories for, we did have, this is all in the moment, we had Daddy's puddings, where Mum was extra busy and he would throw something together with whatever we had in the house. And we had Daddy's hat day once a year on Epiphany. I think we made him a hat and it was his day to wear it. And it was a special occasion. And oh, we had, us kids in the house, we had Boadella. There was only one of him. Right, so our time in Dorset as a interesting family. There was an orgone box in the house, like a TARDIS or some kind of interdimensional portal tucked away in the corner. Yeah, but sometimes it was a something to I don't know. I'm in the air at the moment. So anyway, most Sundays we would go to the beach. It was special, and that was good. And it was strange at school with him as a teacher, and of course me as a family member. And I had to sort of pretend that he wasn't my dad. And of course, he couldn't give me any special treatment, which must have been really strange for him also. Now, he had his own special way. And, you know, it can't be categorized in any sense that on one day, the arm broke on his glasses. It happened by accident. He mended them with sellotape, and they lasted a few years like that. You know, what's good, you can use it. So it's also more use. And sometimes it was fixed with elastoplast. Of course, it needs to be mended up every few days. I think he bought a new pair when the school closed. I guess we didn't have much, but we were family, and there was always enough. He had a way of making things special for us, improvising with ordinary items that were simply to hand. So lots of memories of gardening, of hiking in the hills, exotic and rather obscure holiday destinations, and rather off the beaten track. So remembering the man, there were plentiful impromptu conversations about science or life. We could talk about pretty much everything and anything and everything. There was poetry. And that is a very deep statement, just 3 words, there was poetry. The human potential movement featured large, and it was always in frame, one way or another. I enjoyed the occasional visits that we had in this connection. In daily life, he taught by example, especially being considerate of other people. Like, for instance, walking in the road to leave room on the pavement for the rest of us together, or to let others pass. I notice even I still do this today. My overall impression, he was really well organized and probably had to be that way. What really stands out is kindness. A good listener with compassion and human understanding. And this is only a very, very partial memory. And I would wish to bring more to this occasion. There is no poem, but here, there may be a poem later. Dad, you're the best. Thank you. Thank you for this moment, and thank you for everybody who came here. And on with the show.
Thank you so much, Adam. So next up would be Robin, but I don't know if he's here, Adam. Robin, otherwise we would move on to Mary, but I couldn't see. So should we move on with Mary, or do you know if Robin is here?
I don't actually know.
Okay. I was just looking. Yeah, I was just searching in the chat for the name, and I couldn't find anyone. So, Robin, are you there? If not, we'll move on to Mary, and we'll see if he joins later. So, in that case, I pass the word on to David's sister, to Mary. You just have to click on the microphone symbol in the bottom left. Mary, I don't know if you can see that. Yes, I think now you're on.
Can you hear us?
We can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Till, for what you were saying. And also thank you to Adam. I could certainly identify, Adam, with some of what you were saying about poetry and kindness. I've written some notes. Which I shall attempt to read. When I was born, David was 5. And from an early age, I can always remember admiring my older brother and the friends he brought to the house later in his teens. He loved playing chess with our dad and often played board games with me. Our parents always encouraged us with our varied interests, and when he wasn't with his nose in a book, there was always lively chat going on. His love of reading meant he was often at the library, and one day he took our dog with him, and before entering, he told him to stay outside and wait. He was in there so long that when leaving, he forgot the dog completely, and returning home, our mother asked, "Where's Laddie?" And he rushed back to find Laddie, still waiting patiently outside the library, not having seen David leave. And we all had a good laugh about that. Years later, when I visited him and saw he had a room with piles of books scattered around on the floor, and I think that was in Abbotsbury, overflowing from the bookshelves, of course, I said, "How can you find anything?" And the reply came back, "Ah, it's organized disorder." I remember we had often called him Mr. Lister when he was young, and he was always making lists, a very organized mind, as Adam said. On one of my birthdays in my teens, and when he was at university, David very kindly took me to Covent Garden to see Giselle with the Royal Ballet, which I always remember and so enjoyed very much. David was the poet in the family, as well as his daughter Ailey and her mother Elsa. And to my surprise, I also started writing poetry recently with encouragement from David. Here is one to share with you at this time of remembering David's long and fulfilling life. It's called The One and the Many. A spring arises from the deep. The trickle becomes a stream. No name as yet. Now a river is born. It acquires a name. Many thousands around the globe, all with one destination, becoming one with the open sea. Man is the same, starting small, growing, maturing, and finally, if fate decides, becoming old. A life separate and with a name. When finally the end is reached, the many become one. No more separation can be seen. Still there, but changed in form. Life and death, just different states. The river now at one with the open sea. Infinity. I'm thankful for the many memories I have of David over the years, from our growing up together to our own families getting together, to seeing him on his visits to England, and in more recent years, to our chats online. You're a wonderful brother, David, and I'm so fortunate to have had you as my brother. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary. So I pass the word to my godmother and David and Silvia's best friend, Sally Potter.
Thank you. So when I knew that I was to speak today, I asked myself the question, what do I love about David Boadella? As a dear friend, and as chosen family. And I chose 3 qualities from many. First, his body of knowledge. Second, his open and generous spirit. Third, his sense of wonder. About his body of knowledge, David was a brilliant and confident teacher about the world of the visible and the physical. I first encountered this in a crowded room in East London when he was giving a talk many decades ago. I sat enraptured by the scope of his talk, the relationship between embryonic development and consciousness. He spoke of the neural tube and the intestinal tube, taking in nourishment, digesting and expelling, uniting humans with all living organisms. He implied we all come from the same root, though we develop into different forms. This blend of biology, the science of the body, with the environmental and the metaphysical was an intoxicating bridge between often distinctly divided ways of thinking. Second, his open and generous spirit. We met every year, often twice, over a 15-year span as students in Denmark for courses run by the healer and teacher Bob Moore. In this context, David was not the teacher, but the modest, respectful, and diligent student, taking notes, listening attentively, meditating, occasionally offering a poem or an insight. He shared his dreams and his own struggles. He offered the gift of his vulnerability, knowing that this is a gift that gives strength to others by suggesting that they too may have something to give. In this spirit, I was honored to be invited to be present at the birth of Till. Collaborating with David in supporting Silvia at this moment of primal ecstasy, physical, metaphysical, our friendship was cemented forever. Third, his sense of wonder. I remember David talking animatedly about David Bohm's work, and in particular, string theory, the discovery that something could be both a particle and a wave, could in effect be in 2 places, spaces, or times at once. Here was David, the great adventurer into the world of ideas. And when David left his physical body, we were left with the great puzzle of presence and absence. And perhaps this set of ideas about which he was so excited, string theory, gives us a clue. David is absent and he is present. David is not here and yet he is here. Both are true. Thank you, David. I love you.
Dali. Next, I pass on the word to David's long-term friend and colleague, Courtenay Young.
I feel very privileged to be invited to say something. Actually, I wrote something. Having read David's, his own sort of obituary, a lovely poem where it was to me, it was fairly obvious that he knew he was passing. I found myself writing something about our relationship, our collaboration, which has lasted over 40 years. So, dear David, I first met you about this time of the year in January 1980, 42 years ago at the Boyson Centre in Acton in London. You were leading a weekend training group session, the first of many. And it was such a relief for me to meet somebody who was a gentleman, very English, highly intelligent, deeply compassionate, and very, very skilled. A role model, maybe. I felt we bonded a little then, and subsequent contacts over the years have reinforced that feeling. You have been a mentor for me. I have been a sounding board for you. You were once a therapist for me and worked deeply on my long blocked diaphragm. That night, with my partner in bed, I had my first proper orgasm. I thank you for that. Once you offered me the editorship of Energy and Character, I was deeply touched, but I felt I could not take it on then. Instead, I helped you with the publication of live streams, and that felt such a gift. I also got the Reich book reprinted as a paperback with Arcana for you, with you. Such an amazingly broad and detailed piece of work. It brought him to life. I thank you for that. We have worked together well in groups, with books, in committees, at conferences. We have danced together, metaphorically, in many arenas, on many dance floors, in a sushi restaurant in Strasbourg with other European body psychotherapists, in France, in Paris, in Lisbon, Portugal, in Vienna, Austria, and in Travemünde, Germany. On your way to your Trans-Siberian Railway journey, and when coming back from Japan. At the Minster Centre in London, where I acted as an assistant for a course you gave. And in letters, emails, and phone calls over many years with many meetings, where I got so much from you. I thank you for that. You asked me to help with the complications with Andreas Wachowski and the German language edition of live streams. But at the Travemünde conference that day, you both spoke German. Nichts für mich. We met and worked together in the EAP with your 15 questions and the early infighting with Digby Tanton and with the incredibly complicated Hans Krentz affair. I visited you with you in Abbotsbury when you burnt your mala from Bhagwan. I also visited you in Zurich with Silvia and your young son, Till. And we met at many, many conferences in the UK, mostly in Europe, and also once in America. We have eaten together in a sushi restaurant in Vienna, rebonding, reforging our relationship. Many different dances, different dance floors. You have published some articles of mine in Energy and Character, and I have published articles of yours in the International Journal of Psychotherapy. I've still got a very early copy of The Charge of Consciousness, where you had started working out your ideas on therapy. I have a manuscript copy of your book with David Smith that never really saw the light of day. I would have liked to have visited you in Haydn and spent most of the time in your library, tapping your sources, doing little tap dances. More recently, we met again and again and again by Skype with Silvia on many Sunday afternoons, working together on your latest book, dancing through the chapters to the music of your magnificent prose, your magnum opus, the Handbook of Biosynthesis. Thank you both for that. Strangely, I knew you would ask me to help you with it many years ago. I'm just sorry it took so long, but hey, we finished it just before your recent birthday. Hurrah, hurrah, hip hip hooray, and 3 cheers. A long dance together, teacher, pupil, mentor, chela, not a father figure, for you have your sons, a role model, definitely. I thank you for that. I was with you, you were with us, just after the tragedy with Ayla, that March in 1980. It was our second group meeting, I think. Amazingly, you gave us your grief that weekend. We danced with your tears. I'd had a sister who died suddenly. My tragedies swayed and it pulsed a bit with yours. I thank you with that. I've got a copy of your religious book where you worked out your feelings about her, Ayla's Christianity. It's subtitled Impressions of Jesus the Heretic. Ever the dry humor. But the title is almost a poem from the Gospel of Thomas. Whoever is near to me is near to the fire. Maybe also near to the fire that killed her. Nearness, distance, time passing, many meetings, we will still dance together to different rhythms, in different ways, in maybe many different roles. You're not gone. You're here in my heart. And I thank you for that.
Thank you, Courtenay. I pass the word over to David's friend and medical doctor in the hospital, Renato Waldburger.
Hello, everybody. I would like to thank Silvia and Till for inviting me to say some words in this very touching, intimate part of the celebration. It was just 20 years ago when David gave a lecture about the main ideas of biosynthesis in our clinic for internal medicine in the local hospital in Haydn. The lecture was for the hospital doctors and the practicing doctors from the area. I was very impressed by David's performance. Here stood a friendly man with a secure and self-confident appearance, who was not himself a medical doctor, but spoke to a group of medical doctors, didactically skillful about theories of connections between body, feelings, spirit, and character, as I had never heard or read it before. At the time, I knew Sigmund Freud and Gustav Jung, but Wilhelm Reich was largely unknown to me. The lecture kept me busy, and as a first step, I bought David's book Livestreams, whose German title was Befreite Lebensenergie. Reading the book deepened my interest in the material. And a few years later, in 2008, I began the biosynthesis training. Although I was then already 52 years old, the 5 years of biosynthesis formation have changed me. Considering always the proportions, becoming clear in saying yes and no, feeling and expressing gratitude for the miracle of life, being well connected to my emotional balance, looking always around for cooperation, and many other capabilities have enriched me a lot in my private life and also at work. They made it possible for me to successfully run the clinic in the Hayden Hospital, even in times of very difficult external conditions. A nice friendship developed. I became David's medical doctor for the last 10 years, which was to me a great honor. Rarely have I had a patient who was so interested in information about new medical possibilities and at the same time was able to accept his increasing physical limitations so calmly and without complaint. Several times he was also an inpatient at our hospital. He then was extremely charming with everyone who came into contact with him. This was noticed, and it was often a positive topic of conversation between the nurses. In my view, David was a scientist in the sense that he was always looking for rational, provable arguments. At the same time, however, he had a broad view of the whole, especially of the invisible part of life that accompanies and shapes us in every moment. David was a philanthropist. He was always interested in hearing about other people's experiences. He was always welcoming. His speech was always poetic. Very often he put some humor in it. He believed in the model of cooperation between people. Dear David, I thank you that you existed on this earth and that you continue to be present for me in the invisible world. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Renato. Then I pass the word on to Yoki and Josef, David's friends and long-term supporters of his work.
So, dear family and friends, you hear me?
They don't see you.
Yeah?
We hear you.
Good. 24 years ago, I met David when he gave his last biosynthesis workshop in Berlin. This initial event was the reason to start the education in biosynthesis. Also, I worked later on as a psychotherapist. I keep contact with David. We had some interests in common. Our love to mathematics, philosophy, and poems, but had also a sad and heavy memory because we both lost one of our childs. With respect on this mutual basis, we had numerous discussions and inspiring talks took place. A very sweet memory are the days around the Good Friday and Easter when David and Silvia visited us for a few days in our home. And David played hide and seek with my 3-year-old grandson. I think this memory mirrors the wonderful one of the numerous qualities of David. He could make contact with everyone, no matter of age, gender, or origin. Compassion and real interest in the other who is also a kind of mirror from the self. David was not an ordinary teacher. He constantly never others. He was a master teaching by heart. The last 2 years we had caused by the corona pandemic not a lot of physical contact, but every birthday we talked and phoned together and informed each other how things went on. And now I just remember a very small poem which he sent me once by mail. It's a very old children's song, and maybe you know it. Jokke will read us his few words about the twinkling stars.
Twinkle, twinkle, little star, how wonder what you are, above the world so high, like a diamond in the sky. When the blazing sun is gone, when nothing shines upon, then you shows your little light, twinkle, twinkle all the night. Then the traveler in the dark thanks you for your tiny sparks. He could not see which way to go if you did not twinkle so. And David was the diamond in the skies in many ways for us, and he twinkles in our heart. And when we look up, we see David's star twinkling, still guiding us on our path.
We all miss David very deeply. A friend is gone, a friend who had a deep impact on our life. Thank you, David. See you. Bye. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Jokke and Josef. So this, thank you so much for listening to all the first part of the sharing. So this was the first part of the celebration. Thank you for everyone who has spoken so far, sharing these wonderful and heartfelt memories. And it's just wonderful to hear all of this. I will pass on the word to Lily, who will host the Institute's part of the celebration. So also again, big thank you to Lily for helping organize and for hosting this second part. And yeah, thank you again for everyone being here today and sharing these wonderful words.